preferentials. Pierre first, then Chris.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It is the third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for the Kubernetes Office Hours, our monthly live stream, where we hop onto YouTube and try to answer as many of your Kubernetes questions as possible. You should be in #office-hours on the Kubernetes Slack. Look at the instructions below, those of you listening on YouTube. And I'm looking at the Slack channel now. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you're listening, how does our audio sound today? Before we get started, though, just a quick reminder that the Kubernetes Code of Conduct is in effect, so please be excellent to each other. And before we start, why don't we do some quick introductions? Let's do it this way. Introduce yourself, and then pick the person after you to introduce themselves. Mario, you're going to kick it off today.
Of course, while I'm chewing my breakfast bar.
Yes, that's exactly why I picked you to go first.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mario Lauria. I am a senior SRE DevOps owner of our Kubernetes environment at StockX, which is a startup in downtown Detroit in the e-commerce field. I focus on doing our clusters in EKS, auto-scaling, network redundancy, ingress, things like that, other problems. And as of yesterday, I am a certified Kubernetes application developer.
Ooh, you
so I
passed
look
your
forward to
exam?
your questions. Yeah, I did.
How was it? How was it? Give us a quick TLDR for people listening.
It was a little bit intense. It's very interactive, lots of like real life scenarios, but you're in a terminal, and I felt comfortable, and I actually finished 34 minutes early. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard. It was somewhere in the sweet spot in the middle. So it was awesome. So, all right. And after me, I'm going to pick on Pooja.
Hi, I'm Puya from Giant Swarm in Germany. I do product things and do Kubernetes on Azure, AWS, and on-premise. And I have some security experience with setting up isolation and stuff. Next, Chris.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm a Noogler with Google Cloud Canada's public sector team. My focus is on containerization, hybrid environments. My background has been primarily in on-prem. I'm also a big fan of GitOps related things, so happy to help. Looking forward to answering some questions today. Let's go with Pierre next.
Cool. Hey, I'm Pierre. I'm working at Spectrum, mostly owning our Kubernetes infrastructure there and migrating our infrastructure to Kubernetes. So that's my day-to-day job. I'm trying to help out in the SIG contributor experience a little bit. I'm still dabbling my feet into that. So that's what I'm doing. I think the next one would be Povialis.
Pavelas, yeah. Hey.
Pavelas. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm Pavelas Varsatskas. I'm from Lithuania. People call me Pav for simplicity. I'm a certified Kubernetes administrator, and I know a lot about monitoring, observability, SRN, DevOps stuff. I'm also a maintainer of Thanos project, which is a long-term storage solution for Prometheus. Quite recently, I played around with vertical pod autoscaler and basically autoscaling in for resource requests and stuff like that. So yeah, that would be me.
And is that it? Were you the last one?
Yeah, I believe.
All right, everybody. And I'm your host, George Castro. I work at VMware as a community manager, and I work at SIG Contributor Experience. So first, we're going to go over some quick rules on how this works. And then those of you in the audience, we love to see you typing and stuff. So tell us where you're from in the world, where you're listening from, what you do, and start asking your question. So here's how it's going to work. You're going to ask your question in the channel. It helps if you write like question : in all caps so we can see it. And then Pierre's going to paste those into a document, and then we basically just take them in the order that we received them. And that's how that works. So before we start, however, I do want to thank the following companies for donating and lending us these experts here for this community program. So thanks to Google, Spectrum, Microsoft, VMware, StockX, Giant Swarm, and UW for helping us out. We do have a new West Coast edition. I know most of you are probably listening in Europe. This is the European time zone, but we are experimenting with a much later Western Coast edition stream. So if that's useful for everyone, we are doing that tonight. It's going to be a 10 p.m. night for me today. See, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be great. So yeah. So let me just explain how the whole thing is going to work here. So here are the ground rules. Like I said before, this is a Kubernetes event, so the code of conduct is in effect. So please be excellent to each other in the channel. This is also a judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere, so please help out your buddy by having a supportive environment in the channel and things like that. There are really no dumb questions. We have no problems answering the same questions over and over again. If only we could, because that'd be way easier. And while we will do our best to answer your questions, the panel doesn't have access to your cluster. So live debugging is going to be off topic, but we will do our best to get you moving down the next step. So if you have logs or something like that, use a pastebin service or gist.github.com or something like that. Usually that might help us do that. And then we do try to thread the conversations in the Slack. But if you are going to paste a huge monster thing, please use a pastebin for that. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your experience and pro tips. After all, what we're really interested in is that SuiteSuite production experience. And audience, you can help us out by pasting URLs to the official docs, blogs, or anything that might be relevant to the topic at hand. Almost every single session, we do have a new tool, or there's a new blog post that we haven't seen before and things like that. And I do this kind of stuff every day. So that kind of goes to show how much information is out there and how useful it is to have all of this congregated in one place. So if you have something cool that you want to recommend or something like that, just stick it in the Slack channel. And then what I'll do is at the end of each session, I grab all of the URLs that we talk about and I whack those in the show notes so that in the future, someone who's struggling with something will have at least a place to go or something to get them started. And as always, we do monitor discuss.kubernetes.io for questions there. I'll go ahead and post that thread once we get started. And you can always help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, paying it forward. This is a volunteer program that we put together. So for us, success looks like a lot of people listening and getting help. So anything you can do to help us get the word out is always appreciated. And as always, this panel is made entirely of volunteers. If you want to rotate in or out, please let me know. What I do is I just basically say, hey, who's in for this month? And then as long as we have over 3 or 4 people, we make it happen. So while we do ask you to do, help us out in pasting things in the channel and stuff, if you do too good a job, you might end up on the show like what happened to Pierre and Pop, which is great. So with that, are we ready? It looks like audio is fine. I see Wayne is here. Welcome, Wayne. Welcome, Chris from Broomfield, Colorado, and Yogi from Singapore. Awesome. Thanks for coming in. All right. So let's look at the first question here is from Shy Cats. It says, hello, Office Hour Zeros. Thanks. Here's my question for you today. Autoscaling workers that reads from queue in Kubernetes. We tried Keda. Is that Keda or Keda? But the behavior is always erratic, pods going up and down frequently, although tried multiple configurations. The reason for that erratic behavior is that once the queue fills up, we get more pods, but then they can process all the messages, the queue goes back down to 0 messages, and the pods scale down, and the cycle never ends. I couldn't find any articles or blog spots talking about how to correctly scale your deployments according to queue pace that is unpredictable. That is an interesting question. I'll be happy to hear some advice from people on that topic.
So I have like a follow-up question. What's wrong with basically if queue is pretty full, you scale up as much as possible pods, then queue is flat, you scale down, and cycle never ends. So what's wrong with that, right? This is the approach you want, right? I don't see the problem.
Yeah, so in my brain, in my old system administrator brain, right, I think you always want to see like a set flat thing, and if it's like too spiky or too 0, is that a problem? So would you be okay with this?
Is it maybe because it takes too long to spin up workers again, and the workers can be reused, or is that the problem there? I'm also trying to find out what the problem with the actual thing is, because usually in queue-based jobs you have a worker that runs and then exits. And this sounds more like they're trying to reuse the workers, so them scaling up and down is hurting them because they need warm up or something.
Could cost.
Is that the case?
They haven't responded yet. So
yeah.
Shy Cats, if you're around, they pasted the question earlier this morning about 40 minutes ago. So we'll give them a chance to respond if they're listening.
Yeah, like usually I really like dynamic environments as much as possible. That means things never get stale. So basically for me, scaling up, like the more pods scale up and scale down, I like that, because that's just sort of, I like that dynamic environment. Means if one node goes down, new pods will will be brought up. Basically, a single node going down won't impact the whole operations, right? So this is usually a good thing for me from a SRE point of view.
Right, because when you're looking at it and you see all that churn, you're like, I know it's working because it's busy. Well, Waleed points out, so isn't Autoscale have a timing like 5 to 10 minutes before it triggers? Like, could you set thresholds like that? What's the threshold situation on queues?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Does anyone have experience with Keda? I haven't used it at all. I've just read about it, and it seems very flexible. So I would bet there is some way to configure it to not scale down too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking like Keda, the whole point of it is it's reactive, right? So you can get that scale to 0.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just a matter of having X number kind of on standby.
Yeah, maybe you can set the minimum to something.
Yeah, I just want to say that I know in 118 there's some new options for HPA that control the timers by which HPA definitions will take action and scale in or scale out. That was never before a thing. So we've actually seen issues at StockX where we have a push notification, a massive influx of traffic, we scale up, but then we actually scale back in before that's actually done. And we have no control to say, no, actually give a grace period of 15 minutes before you actually make any hard decisions. That there's no new options. I'm in the docs right now and I'm not seeing where those are for 118. I forget. So if someone can find them and link them, I think they're either alpha or beta. But maybe that will help this person. The actual problem is a little bit hard to decipher.
Just to add, as the question mentioned, Keda, basically the auto-scaling operator. I've looked at this definition and it looks like it provides you an option to provide like a cooldown period, min replica count and max replica count. So basically, if you want to like make this behavior more steady, maybe you can set like min replica count to like some fixed minimum and then give it a bit room to breathe, to go up, and then cooldown period might be like a bit larger for you. So maybe worth playing with those parameters.
Because I'm wondering if from like a cloud perspective, maybe you're just trying to figure out what to, right? If you have 5 reserved instances and you could just set that to 5, but you're willing to wait, but you always know that you're using, you know what I'm saying? It's like, well, if I have 5 reserved instances for the course of the month, that's probably better than bursting to 20 every once in a while, because they don't really say what the time, like, are these long processing jobs? Are they like, how quickly do they need the results, right? Is it stuff that can wait, basically, is what I'm thinking. And maybe they're just trying to optimize for keeping something flat instead of very spiky.
Yeah, but then maybe it's not worth auto-scaling. If we have this, basically, we don't care about result immediately and queue might be large. Maybe a couple of workers, like static amount of small amount of workers, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they haven't responded yet, so hopefully they are listening. And if they do, if you're listening out there, shy cats, feel free to just respond. If we do have questions that are kind of complex or they take a long time, we'll just move on to the next one and then revisit this as we get more information. So if we say something and you don't understand what it is, feel free to ask a follow-up. We always like to do that to make sure that you know what's up. All right. Felix DPG asks, hello, office hours mates. I need to know if there's a way to use config map versioning in my deployments. For example, 2 apps use the same config map, but I need to change the config map from one app. The other app needs to use the original config map. Is there a controller or something that could do this type of witchcraft? Thanks a lot, by the way. I can't participate live. Keep in mind the question, and they will watch the video afterwards. Awesome. Thanks, Felix. So what's the... who wants to take a stab at this one?
So by the looks of it, it looks like the way I would approach this problem is basically I would have 2 config maps. Because if one application needs one config map and the other needs different config map with a little bit different parameters, this feels like 2 different separate config maps. and then you can version them differently. You can update them differently. You don't need like any kind of controller here. You just need like, yeah, basically put your config maps into Git, version them, and make sure that you basically know what's happening.
Mm. Do you think? Sorry, I was going to ask you a follow-up question because he's not listening live. Do you think that maybe they have very similar config maps and they're just changing a few things, and they're probably trying to like reconcile that so they're not forking into a bunch of config? Is there like a templating thing they could do? Or
yeah, exactly. I was also thinking most probably some better templating, like, I don't know, whatever you want to use, customize Helm, KPT, Tanka, whatever is out there to get like your base config map plus like your additional versioning. It might also be a use case where they are doing something like a blue-green deployment where they want to update, like the one config map is already, like the one deployment is already using the new config and then the other one. So I think most probably the way to solve it is definitely on the CI/CD part, where you're either doing it with templating or splitting into two YAMLs that you apply with GitOps.
Actually, I also have done similar stuff already, for example, with Terraform and also with Helm. So yeah, this is definitely how I would do it as well.
Okay, customize Helm. Any other? I've tossed some URLs in the Slack. Anybody have recommendations there?
Speaking about customize, I don't think customize would actually help because you can only overwrite config maps. Like merging on config maps, I don't think that will work. But I might be wrong. So I would maybe look at Helm and the other option.
The most straightforward or most common, most probably. But if you're happy with Terraform is Kubernetes plugins are getting better and better.
Any other recommendations? So two options there. So since we don't know what their config map looks like, if it's maybe needed really simple and small, consider just forking them into their individual ones. And if it's something you could use Helm for, that will way to go. All right. Any other questions on this one? And audience, if you have any tools you want to recommend in this, let us know. Philippe Martin says, hello from Paris, wants to drop a link to href.io, making the Kubernetes API doc more accessible. This is awesome. I am going to PM you after this because this is great. And I've wanted just like, I like how it's organized already, just right off the top of the bat. This is a great job. So thanks for letting us know about href.io. All right. Next we have Manny asks, is there any way to show a set of apps with similar labels in a CRD?
What was the question again?
Is there any way to show a set of apps with similar labels in a CRD?
So the CRD should summarize the apps, like.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're.
Or is it an app CRD?
Yeah, I'm wondering if are they just trying to find all the similar labels in an app that are deployed by a CRD? Hold on. My phone is ringing.
I guess I would maybe ask for more information. Maybe like let's pan out a little bit zoom out a little bit on this one. Like, what are you trying to accomplish, kind of thing?
Yeah. So Manny, if you're listening, that would really help us out a lot. Okay. Next. Sorry, I'm just adding the questions here. Next question is from Andre, who joins us from Japan. I'm gonna do the easy question first. Where can I find links to the images of the Kubernetes control components? This is something that just moved. So it's Kate's gcr.io. One second. These were just moved recently or in the process of being moved.
Do we even have control like images anymore, like since Hypercube got deprecated? Like, do we have single images like containers per.
You mean like this? Hold on, let me stick this in the Slack here. I just know this because I happened to be at a meeting when they were talking about it.
I also use this link like to search for, but this is Google Images, so I'm not sure.
Right. So to fill in everyone who isn't doing Kubernetes day to day, this is a thing that was running on Google's infrastructure and is in the process of being stood up on the Kubernetes.io infrastructure under the CNCF, and that's just been a process that has taken a while and things like that. So somewhere in here is where it is, and I know we're publishing things, but I don't know how to get. I see all the CI information and the repo information in there, but I don't see any instructions how to use it.
I'm looking for it. I can post the Kubernetes issue.
Yeah, I know there's an issue. We're in the process of migrating there, but that should help you find what you need. All right. While we sort that, we definitely have room for more questions, so keep them coming. All right. Andre also has another question. It says, for people who do not use kubeadmin and have their own way of Kubernetes installation, is there a recommendation to migrate out from Hypercube, which will be removed from Kubernetes 1.19? So for people not using kubeadmin. I don't know on this one. I think we'd have to ask someone from Cluster Lifecycle.
Yeah, I know we did something there because we were using Hypercube and we moved away from it, but I don't remember what we did. I wasn't that involved anymore.
Yeah, and we're pretty much all kubeadmin over here. Well, I know if I were to ask someone in Cluster Lifecycle, they would say, why aren't they using kubeadmin? But I don't, things are complicated, so I don't want to go there. I get it. Yeah, I'm not sure on this one. I think we're going to have to ask someone and get back to you on this one.
I can check also and post something into the channel.
Yeah.
I might have a question for the panel.
Yeah, awesome. Because we are caught up on questions. So let me do a quick thing here. If you have more questions, feel free to ask them. I see Andre is typing, so we're getting more information out of that. That's always good. Feel free to keep on typing. And Manny is typing as well, so we'll get them a chance to catch up. In the meantime, Pierre's got a question for the group.
Right. I mean, let's discuss this topic maybe. So in the recent weeks, like 2 big Docker registries have been down a couple of times, like Quay and GitLab. Many people have been affected. And how do you manage this? Like, how do you basically either have a backup in a second registry and use this as a pull-through registry or something else? Like there's Kubernetes operators that do this stuff that just like enable you to peer-to-peer from your other Kubernetes nodes, as well as like just having like an offsite backup. But yeah, I would just like to discuss this, how like everyone manages this.
I can do a quick run through. My previous place, we were using Harbor, and it has the ability to replicate to a target registry. So we ran that on-prem, and then we'd have the ability to replicate up to GCR or Azure Container or Docker Hub, whatever. So that's a good option for that. And then a few weeks back, the topic came up of caching containers or a cache pass-through. And so Harbor has that coming, but I can't remember if the other ones have that in.
What was it called? Nexus?
Yeah.
There's Nexus as well,
Yeah, so that would be another option.
What it does currently is only for Docker Hub, and I think that's the ongoing open issue at Harbor currently, that the official implementation just supports Docker Hub, and as long as you're not using that, the caching doesn't work. Because we were also looking into using it. I think there is some ways around it, but they're a bit hacky. I think what we did in the end was like to have a real direct failover without having to manually replace kind of the registry where it comes from, was that Docker and Containerd support registry mirrors. So as long as you're not using a registry prefix, you can mirror images, and then as long as you own the same organization under every registry, for example, I don't know, Docker Hub and ACR and I don't know, GCR, for example, it will fall back in a certain order. But then you cannot use like basically the registry prefix. You cannot choose choose in front.
But how would you do the failover then? I mean, for me, like, would you do it like on a DNS level or something else?
So for
Like
us, the Docker daemon does it. If you use the solution that I was explaining.
Oh, okay.
Which is the easiest. Like we didn't want to do a failover.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Yeah.
Like the DNS failover or others are more complicated, I feel.
Yeah.
But it's not possible to do for everyone, I assume. And we've only done it with like critical images that are used for cluster scaling, for example, like anything that is on a per node basis. And
I want to shout out how Yogi's solution says, I always recommend replicating required containers in a local repo, and then follows up with, even the clusters are not exposed to the internet, so there's no way to pull images from there. I like you. I like that. Gotta bring that.
Yeah,
I
there's
just
some
was thinking
peer-to-peer
like
solution there. So
yeah.
Definitely, there's peer-to-peer stuff as well. Yeah, I just was bringing it up because I saw like lots of people were affected by the GitLab stuff being down as well as Quay. So,
what was the name of the peer-to-peer one?
DragonFly, yeah.
DragonFly.
And it also integrates pretty well with Harbor, I think.
Really? I did not know that. All right.
There was a talk 2 KubeCons ago from the Harbor and on using DragonFly with Harbor.
Oh,
I'll try to dig up the link.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah. It's pretty dope. Oh, nice. And DragonFly is also now hosted by the CNCF. So with both Harbor and DragonFly being CNCF projects, that kind of checks all the boxes. Nice. Anybody else have any of the deep? Nobody even wants to discuss the failover. You're just like, I'm just avoiding it entirely and using the Docker daemon option. Interesting.
It's not a perfect solution, to be honest. It's
I would, I don't know, depending on a third party source that's having a bunch of reliability issues, either might be you might have to weigh that yourself. That's an exercise for the audience. All right. So Manny, I see that you are back. Let's come back and address your question. So initially they asked, is there any way to show a set of apps with similar labels in a CRD? So we asked for more information. It says, we are thinking of using a Helm operator, but my question is that how can I do things like, for example, creating a backup, upgrading, etc.? What I saw from the tutorials that we deploy an operator which looks into an object containing values.yaml and make sure that the objects created adhere to those values and reload objects if we make any changes. But I want my operator to do more than that. P.S. I don't know. Golang, is there any way to achieve this?
It seems they want to build, or they would like to have an operator around Helm. But I think the upstream project was thinking of building one, but currently is still busy with everything Helm 3. We built one, but it's built for a very multi-cluster use case. So I'm not sure if that works for them. Yeah, but doing much more, like the backups and upgrades and everything included, that I haven't seen that out there these days. Like maybe the operator framework, operator hub thingy would go in that direction, but then that's not easily extendable to your own apps. You would basically need to build an operator per app again.
Right.
Yeah, I guess reading again the question, if you want to make operator to do more than that, I guess you will have to learn Golang or like implement, like there are other operator libraries. I think you can write one in Java or other languages. But I think if you want something really specific that you have in mind, I don't think you'll find a good solution for that, right? So basically,
especially for backups.
Yeah, or upgrades, or yeah. It feels like if you want to achieve this, you'll have to like code it yourself, probably.
Zalando has one that works with Python, an operator framework called KOPF, I think, KOPF. That's usually oftentimes easier for a lot of people because Python is more common around the non-cloud native people.
I will toss that in there. Okay.
Isn't there also a framework for operators in JavaScript or TypeScript?
Let's look. And Waleed says there's an operator around Helm and Ansible. They tossed the link there. Huh. Meta controller framework. This one's new. New to me. Any other recommendations here? Marco's writing frameworks and or operators in PHP and stuff because he's crazy. He loves it. He says don't add him at Twitter. And I guess this morning Chris Short, that's why he's not here, did a log stream related to Ansible for developing operators, and he's tossed a link there to his Twitch. Ooh, I need to see what's going on there. And I see Manny's giving us more information there. So let's see. In the meantime, we will give him some time to digest some of that. Jake Walden, welcome to the show, asks, I'm running Kubernetes at the edge using Rancher K3s running on top of Ubuntu 18.04. I have some pods that are running on the host network to avoid some natting. I've observed that if the IP address of the machine itself changes while the machine is running, the pods on the host network do not update their IP addresses with new host address. Any ideas why they wouldn't do this? Is this a good idea? Changing IP addresses on the host on the fly like that? Like, I know in the pods, that's like the dynamic part, but I'm not sure how stable the host IP is supposed to be.
I'm sure. I mean, if you have load balancers on this, like, I think it's not a problem per se, but it's definitely not bound to the IP addresses of the pods. Like it's because the pods, they should stay even after. But you would need to update your IP tables or IPSV rules on the other hosts. And so there would be.
But coming to so basically pods are running in host mode, right? Meaning host networking mode, and basically you change the node's IP address. This is weird. So what's gonna happen? Is pod gonna get an updated IP? Like, is it gonna know that it has a new IP address?
Right. He's saying it doesn't.
Right.
But it does want to. Right. And he mentions that the machine is owned by a customer, so there's nothing you can really do about the host changing the IP address. So that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, if you run on host network, that's definitely an issue.
Yeah. I think this is undefined behavior, like really undefined behavior. Nobody's doing that.
Yeah, on purpose anyway.
Yeah.
Most probably you would have to roll the pods to get a new.
Yeah, I was just thinking, could you write a trigger that would reboot the pods to get the new IPs on a host IP change?
Yep. And Waleed's asking, is it a good thing to have a host network pods? How generally do you all do it? You just do the default kind of.
I would definitely avoid it. I'm not sure if it's really needed for the use case of avoiding natting.
Right.
Because I mean, if you have an overlay network or something like Bird or something running there.
Bird. Is that with an I or a Y?
Bird with an I from that's what Calico comes with, for example.
Oh, okay, got you.
It's basic BGP network, I think.
Oh, cool.
That shouldn't need nothing.
I mean,
there's Bird right there.
Yeah. I mean, I think avoid host networking as much as possible. I think about security, think about all the things. Your container will have access to host networking. This is generally a super bad practice for containerized environments. So yeah. So basically, avoid that. If you think nothing is a problem due to performance, you can use, like, there are eBPF solutions which like are super fast, like in kernel, really fast. Like, you will avoid any kind of performance issues. There are solutions which, like IPVS, also pretty fast, pretty robust, but similar to IP tables. So yeah, avoid host networking. I think maybe that will solve your issue.
Chris had to do the monthly link to Cilium, because that's
Bob's not here. Somebody had to do it.
Bob's not here, so somebody had to do
Yeah.
it.
I was just about to mention that.
Yes, this episode not brought to you by Cilium, but yeah. So yeah, it's just, if you get rid of that problem, I'm just curious if if you don't do the host networking, sure, you're gonna have to deal with setting some of this stuff up, but you'll probably be more in line with what everybody else is doing, right? Any other advantage, like you mentioned security and whatnot, any other advantages to avoiding host mode? I'm thinking for the future, if we ever need to refer to this again.
And you would be, like, if you use host network, you're definitely limited in terms of ports. So because you basically can only use the host ports, and then you will definitely run out of ports at some point, and you cannot use the same port on
or conflicting ports, right? All of it. Yeah.
But on the edge, most probably you're not running that many things, so that might not be the biggest issue for them.
But if you're on the edge, is the security concerns there with host mode networking different? More dangerous?
I mean, depending on what device it's running, maybe it's a device that's anyway so separate from things.
Right. Yeah. That's why we would also have to keep recommendations.
You would also have to keep track of what ports you give out, right? If you use host networking.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Some overhead that you add as well.
Right. I imagine you do run, as soon as you run out of 80, you're just done.
It does sound sometimes like if you're using host port, you are trying to treat the machine like you would treat a machine without containers and Kubernetes. So just like expose a service on a port, and then you're very fast back into the world where we were before all this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. So, all right, Jake, that will hopefully give you something to think about. Feel free to post a follow-up question. We always do that. He goes, host networking was driven by the application using WebRTC to stream video. So natting created many issues there. Does that give us any more insight on possible solutions here? Like, I know people are doing video streaming.
So, like, I don't know enough about WebRTC. So was it more like is it a stateful connection or something like that? Is it like you're only getting load balanced to one pod, or well, I'm wondering what's the actual issue with netting.
Yeah, or is the app maybe not container aware as it should be?
I was gonna say there could be MTU issues, there could be port issues with NAT. Like maybe it's just like misconfigured or it needs a little bit more work. But yeah, NAT can be tricky for certain applications for sure. But if you configure it, you can usually make it work.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, hopefully that will give you some information, Jake, with the information that we have about your app. For a lot of this stuff, it's like really hard to guess if you don't have access to the application and things like that. So hopefully that will give you at least something to investigate there. And like always, feel free to come back with follow-up questions and stuff. We definitely love that. Okay, let's see. Next question is from. All right, so we did the Docker registry outage. We are kind of on questions. We got about 20 minutes.
There's a follow-up from Manny.
Ooh, okay.
Should I read it?
Yeah, I'm looking at the document. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
Take it. I'll work the notes for a second.
So Manny said there's no straightforward way for the operator stuff. He will look into the Java and Python recommendations. He already has something that is based on JSON.NET. And basically, he's thinking on how to distribute the way he wants the software or application to run on Kubernetes. So what in my mind came up was like a Helm chart that is separately versioned to the application. So that's usually a way to deploy stuff. But yeah, maybe someone else has ideas.
Yeah, I'm tapped out on this one.
Yeah, what I've seen from most vendors, like giving out their software to run on Kubernetes, is they use Helm charts in a very extended way. Still, it can get quite complex sometimes because of dependencies and basic configuration changes between each and every client. Because as much as we want, Kubernetes is still different every time you set it up, right? There's all the different configurations. Do you have PSPs installed? Do you have RBAC? All these things. Mm-hmm. It's not easy for a vendor, I can imagine. But Helm would definitely do the upgrades for you. Right? And you could use something like a pre-hook for doing a backup before an upgrade.
And also the rollback stuff would also be included, like with Helm rollback as well. So you can
as much
very
as
much
people
define.
bash on Helm, it's a good tool.
There was a question that came in on VPA.
I'm getting to that one next.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want.
Oh, dibs. So you're saying dibs, right? So Shyam asks, when should I use VPA? That's a vertical pod autoscaler. Is it when the app doesn't support horizontal scaling? You know, I've always wondered this myself. When do you go this way and when do you go this way? And I know for a lot of it is the application specific, but what other things are y'all looking for when you're making these decisions?
I just wanted to say, like, it really depends on your app and your needs. Obviously, vertical scaling is increasing the amount of resources. Horizontal is the amount of instances. The vertical pod autoscaler I know is not really GA yet, as far as I know. I could be wrong, could have just recently got updated. I haven't looked in a while, but I know that one of the best things that it does provide, and I think I mentioned this prior, is at least you can start with recommendations and see what it would actually recommend for your services from a resource request point of view, which can really help when you're provisioning and deploying. So yeah, that was Goldilocks. Thank you, Pierre, for linking it. That's probably the de facto for it provides fancy UI, and it gives you both burstable and guaranteed QoS recommendations for your resources. And I think that's the biggest thing from VPA. We're going to actually be implementing it here soon at StockX, so I can at least give developers a pane of glass into best practice for setting resources on their applications. We're moving from a burstable to a guaranteed QoS for our applications, which will more cost up front because we reserve more resources, but in the long run, when we do have major spikes, it'll definitely help. I know VPA can then be kind of enacted to take action and actually apply those resources for you as well. And that might be something you want to tiptoe into with testing and whatnot. So that's my 2 cents. I know Pavlos probably wants to say a few things as well and knows more than me. So
a lot of links in chat.
Yeah. So yeah, like last week or like 2 weeks ago, I implemented VPA at UW, and it's amazing. It's really good. It's great. I just have only positive words. So around starting from like what I did is basically I connected VPA to Prometheus, because I used to have VPA has 2 modes. One is basically checkpointing, which will contact metrics server to get metrics. We'll write a checkpoint. I saw that this container used that much memory, that much CPU. And after some amount of points, it will do another checkpoint, and it will do some amount of checkpoints, and then it will figure out a resource recommendation. So that never worked well for me. I don't know why. I never debugged. But once I connected VPA to Prometheus, it was just magical. It just gives us amazing recommendations for resource requests. So we typically use it to just, I put VPAs on like all the stateful sets because you can't really scale stateful sets really easily. So definitely, I just put on those. What Google recommends basically in their documentation, though, don't put it on JVM or any Java-based or virtual machine-based deployments and things like that, because it doesn't understand virtual machines and virtual machines memory.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one big limitation. If you read the Google paper, the way they have it running is basically they have one service called Autopilot, and it does both horizontal and vertical autoscaling automatically. Yeah, obviously you can configure it you can configure it in limited, but it does it automatically. So I think the future is going to be like basically vertical pod autoscaler somehow merges together and works well with horizontal pod autoscaler. So maybe we won't have this question anymore. Yeah, but from the design doc, you definitely read the design doc if you're interested in implementing it. It has like quite a lot of use cases and when to use VPA or horizontal pod autoscaler.
You sound like a man who deployed a tool that saved you a lot of time. I can tell you're like just like really into this. That's awesome. Yeah, and it feels like Goldilocks is one of those tools that consistently gets mentioned on the show as well. So, any y'all using that?
For me, for example, I'm using also VPA for like I have pods at scale or deployments at scale on queue size and not on the usage metrics of CPU and memory. And I'm using the VPA recommendation to basically see, hey, how much resources does it actually need? Like if the service is fast enough to process a lot of items, I just want to know, like, okay, am I actually right-sizing the deployment or not? So, yeah.
Follow-up question here. Y'all mentioned the, for things not using it, for things that use the JVM and things like that. I know in the past, containerization and, VM-based languages like Java have been a problem, but, those are being addressed and stuff. Are these limitations because of, like, where's the bug? Is it because VPA doesn't support it as well, or is it still kind of a fundamental issue where we don't know what's,
I believe it's a fundamental issue because Java, the way sort of JVM works, it's you set how much memory you will need, like XMX flag and XMS flag. So basically you tell, okay, create a virtual machine with like 2 GB of RAM, right? And then Java does whatever it wants with it. It imagines I have 2 gigs dedicated to me, right? And then vertical pod autoscaler, what can it do? It can only give you like best case scenario 2 gigs, right? And worst case scenario also 2 gigs. So and the newer Java version somehow don't actually take all that memory. But if your application starts to consume and consume and consume, get more requests, get more memory keeps increasing, it will still always keep that limit. So you need sort of user input to change the XMX flag. And it's basically not really, I think it's a fundamental issue more than anything else.
Okay. So definitely, the reason I wanted to explain that is for, those people that are looking at the applications, they have Java and things like that and might not be aware of those things. It's just one of those things where I've been slowly putting together a blog post that we're all going to work on. I am telling you this now. The top things that we've learned from office hours, and this is just one of those things that, the Java resource issue just is a thing that we need to constantly remind people that, if you have an application based on the technology, you have a little bit of homework to do there in order to ensure you get behavior that you're looking for. Anybody else want to wax poetic about VPA? And then about anything to say about the horizontal pod autoscaler? Anyone actually have any quote unquote legacy apps that surprised you and worked a lot better horizontally than vertically or the other way around?
Nothing. No, we have a monolith, a PHP monolith that we've slowly been containerizing, and definitely, I think the big thing there is if you're going to auto scale that, you have to dial in your readiness and liveness probes, or else you're going to be in a world of hurt. And so we had instances where like we had problems where like new instances would come up and they wouldn't exactly be ready, and we couldn't dial in like a great check for when they were ready, and so they'd start getting traffic. And likewise, when instances came down when we were doing a deployment, and I know a lot of people probably encountered this, but we had to implement pre-stop, like a sleep 10 seconds, because of the delay between the endpoint being pulled out and the ingress being updated. And so we'd have instances that were coming down that were taking traffic but couldn't serve it, right? So there's a lot of like life cycle centric things that you really have to focus on when you're going to do that. And that for auto scaling, that also applies, right? Because you're going up and down in an auto scaled world. So we started very sensitive, and then we started to dial in a lot more. And that workload was definitely like guaranteed QoS. But I think with HPA, you're never going to get it right the first time. You really have to, it's really trial and error for a lot of it, depending on your application. Any new enhancements to your application, extra things it does, memory consumption, things like that, when resources start changing because of the nature of the application, that is going to impact your HPA. I think a big one for me, end of last year, our front end is in Node, and it actually runs in its own cluster. And it took me like a good month plus to really dial in great HPA values for it, but I haven't touched it in literally all of this year. That cluster just runs, it auto scales both HPA and cluster autoscaler. And that's like our front end, stockx.com on your browser, right? Like I haven't touched it at all. That's a huge personal accomplishment, but it took a lot of learning and a lot of tuning to get in. Node is not the most forgiving workload on in containers, let alone in a distributed system like Kubernetes. So that was a lot of fun. Learned a lot, but yeah, some apps just it's hard. We actually just had an issue too with DNS where our GraphQL was routing DNS query 2.7 million DNS queries in a minute or two, and using keep alives and more intelligent connections and having redundancy there with those connections. So if certain pods go down, like that all flows into the overall health, and you need those primitives when you're auto scaling, or else there will be a cascading effect of other things having issues as well. So
good to know. All right, any other pod auto scaling topics while we're here? Awesome, lots of great.
Currently writing a blog post series about it. So
okay.
First one is HPA. So I'm currently still working a bit on the things, but yeah, the choice of metrics is definitely a tricky one. Like which one to scale on, when to scale on. Is it like 60% or 56 or 65, or should you, based on requests, for example, scale? Like Mario was saying, it changes if your software changes. So with third-party software, it might still be easier because, I don't know, Nginx doesn't change that much between versions. But like if you're building your software and you're building a new feature, your scaling might change, right? It's not trivial at all. And a lot is changing now. I think a lot of new features are coming in Bot 18. Some of them landed, and we're going towards GA, I think, with HPA soon. So there's still some caps open.
That is good to know. All right, last question of the session belongs to Shyam Yos. Thanks for joining us. Oh no, that was the last one. Last question is actually from Rakesh Paluri. I hope I got that right. It says, I am using Calico networking on a self-hosted Kubernetes cluster on AWS. I have this problem where all the nodes get registered to the load balancers. Is there a way to avoid it, at least limited to certain node groups? Excuse me.
So from my point of view, I don't see it being a problem. So let's say you have like 100 nodes or like 1,000 nodes. And imagine your load balancer is a typical, like, let's say Nginx, HA proxy, something. So HA proxy load balancing into 1,000 targets doesn't sound bad, right? It's not a huge number. You're never going to have like a super huge number of nodes unless you're like Google or AWS.
They're using
Yeah.
AWS load balancers, but like in the thread,
Yeah.
they're saying they're using service of type load balancer and an ingress AWS ALB. So I would also not worry about any of those, even with 500 nodes, which seems to be what their limit is scaling. They're just worrying about like why scale, like load balance to 500 if the service is running on 4, and like if that's creating too many hops, basically. I think I thought with the ALB that wouldn't be the case, because the ingress ALB does create does register on a node basis, but service of type load balancer will definitely register all your nodes.
I'm just catching up here. Thank you, Yogi, for fielding this question here. I'm just reading through. Using external.
I'm guessing he's using NLBs, and then the NLBs reference the node ports on each node, and then he's probably got whatever his ingress is as a daemon set, probably, which is similar to how we do it on EKS.
He goes, one solution I was thinking of to implement was to register and deregister from the load balancers using lifecycle hooks. Not sure if anyone used it like this or if there are any pitfalls.
Like the thing is, like, even if you have it load balanced to all nodes and you have only 4 instances of your service, if one of them gets rescheduled, it might land on one of those 100 nodes, and you don't want to have like register and deregistering load balancers all the time, because it'll just increase your latency of rescheduling.
I was going to say the same thing. Like when I think about it from a networking perspective, yeah, it is really weird that like I'm going through a node that doesn't have the workload, and then it's going to go to that Nginx ingress, and then it's going to route to the workload on another host. It seems kind of odd, but like when you look at like the bigger picture, it's more of the redundancy, reliability, resiliency of anything happening in this distributed environment. I'm covered across all nodes. So yeah, and the big thing too is like nodes, AWS node, any cloud has instances that just get wonky, stop working, won't, networking blocks out. Like there are random issues you need to prepare for failure, and the best way to do that is to kind of spread the love, if you will, spread the workload across nodes. So like it seems like a really like inefficient way of doing it, but I'd say unless you're really having like a big issue, like don't put too much effort into changing it. So
yeah, I couldn't imagine that creating a lot of issues. I mean, it's a network hub for sure. Latency should be trivial though. Like, you're within a single region, or within a single AZ.
We're about to run out of time here, but let me just give you one more information. Combination of external traffic policy and lifecycle hooks for register and deregister from LB should keep the registered instances to LBs in check, ? Or do you think there are obvious failure scenarios here? And then we'll wrap it up.
I mean, the thing is, then they would not be using service of type load balancer anymore. So they would need to basically do it themselves. And every time you do something yourself, which is usually upstream being automated, there is a risk of just your automation breaking. And as you're the only one who is using it, you're most probably on your own then. Whereas like when upstream breaks, at least there's someone upstream fixing it.
All right, and with that, we are going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank our panelists for doing this. We are going to give away 2 Kubernetes t-shirts. The way it works is if you've asked a question and we address it on the air, you can have a t-shirt on us. It is the Kubernetes, not this Kubernetes t-shirt, but the one with a logo on it. Shai Katz and Rakesh, the first and last person to ask a question, you have won a Kubernetes t-shirt. That's just the way the dice roll worked out this time. So I will PM you after this and give you a story. Yeah, Mario, talk so that the camera switches to you there. This is what the t-shirt looks like. There you go. Hold it up. Yeah, it's just fantastic. As always,
I'm sorry, this is a very used t-shirt, so there's some cracks in the,
in the logo, I've got 7 of them.
I don't think they have this anymore. I'm not sure.
Definitely do not have that anymore.
Do not have that, so that's a lie.
Yeah.
So
that's a collector's item.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as always,
I'm wearing it.
But
Great
don't
shirt.
worry, Yogi. We are going again. We are going again in about 12. We're in almost exactly 12 hours from now. We're going to go again. So everyone feel free to keep hanging out in the channel. And sometimes I just give out random t-shirts for those people helping out. But a big thanks to the CNCF for sponsoring the t-shirts that we give away. So with that, anything else before we wrap? I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Yeah, no, you don't, Rob, you don't get that specific shirt that's pre-worn. You'll get a brand new one. I promise it comes in a bag. All right. And with that, thanks everybody. Stay safe out there. And we will see everybody in 12 hours. And we will see everyone in August. Feel free to hang out in the channel and just hang out. And I will reach out to those of you that have won the shirts. And with that, thanks. Panel, stick around for a sec.